check, check.
Check, check.
Hey folks, is the mic working? Great. If you're in line for food, stay in line. Listen while you wait and get food. It's totally fine. I'm so delighted to have so many people here. It's really wonderful. So thank you so much. I want to start by thanking the band, Red Nucleus. Maybe just a hand for Red Nucleus. Just really great to have the music here, and also to recognize that art is a key part of what we're doing. Art is a key part of how we think about everything, and especially the future. We're going to have questions at the very end, so save your questions for the speakers until we get to the end. And I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And so I'm Rob Dunn. I'm the Senior Vice Provost for University Interdisciplinary Programs. My wonderful job is I get to bring people together around thinking about topics that don't fit in departments, don't fit in colleges, and especially to do that while thinking about the future that we want. And so it's a great job, and I get to be at events like this. And so I'm grateful that you're here. I'm grateful to be here. And so what we're going to start with today is just an acknowledgement of how we got here, which is this is a partnership of many, many entities on campus. You will meet some of them throughout the night. We won't mention all of them, but key partners include the Office of University Interdisciplinary Programs. That's the office I get to work in. The University Libraries, which is a wonderful partner for good things of all kinds. And the Initiative for Community Growth and Development in the College of Design. And that initiative is reimagining how we think about the state of North Carolina and growth in this state. And so a great set of partners. Organizing committee you can see here. Linda, Ben, Karen, me. I didn't really do that much, right? So I'm like the figurehead. Chuck Flink, Amy, Adam Walters, Jory Weintraub. This group of people from all over campus who thinking about the futures of cities is important and exciting in a way to bring people together. And so if you enjoy things tonight, it's because of these people. If things frustrate you, it's because of me. That didn't deserve applause. I don't know where that came from. We're also able to do this tonight because of extraordinary benefactors. So the Keenan Institute for Engineering, Technology, and Science has helped to support the Longview Project, which is what allows us to think on these longer time horizons. The Triangle Center for Evolutionary Medicine, the Comparative Medicine Institute. And what you see tonight from the Office of University Interdisciplinary Programs perspective is part of our Longview Project, which is an attempt to figure out how do we as an institution, as a state, as a community, begin to think not just about 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but really think about what we want in urbanization, in technology, in biodiversity, in everything else over longer time horizons. Those time horizons our children will inhabit. And so how do we have those conversations? The Longview Project has been established with support from Keenan and other entities to help us think about those longer term views, with the recognition that often the people who can most help us think are writers. They're historians, they're sociologists, in partnership with the engineers and scientists who think in different ways about the future. And so that's the big picture element of what this is part of. And this is one of what will be many ways of coming together to think about the future. And so thanks for being part of the inaugural version of this. I'm going to ground our conversation about the future in the context of a sort of frustrating element of the past as we think about cities in particular. And this is a paper I was able to be involved in a small way a number of years ago. And this is a scientific paper that attempts to estimate where will growth happen in urbanization in the Southeast if we just keep doing what we're doing. If humans act like ants and obey some simple rules about where to build and not build, you build where there are roads, you don't build where roads are farther away, you avoid wetlands depending on how we change our policies. And when you do that, what do you get? Well, you get the growth you see around the yellow areas. So the yellow areas are existing growth, and this is a little bit of an old paper, so like the yellow areas of the past. And the red areas are future growth. And so the default, this model suggests, is a kind of urbanization that grows like a caterpillar from where we are. And so this is in essence a model, if we don't make a plan, what do we get? And the reason we're here tonight is to come together to think about how do we make a plan? How do we imagine a bolder future? How do we think about what we want for a city, not just what results from what happens if we keep doing what we're doing? And so when I first presented this slide a number of years ago, somebody said, well, why is that where Charlanta is, which is what we dubbed this giant city? And it became clear that part of the reason is that that's where I-85 is. That I-85 connected cities, I-85 stands along the line of the rail line, and so its urbanization follows urbanization going back a little ways. And so I presented that, and then somebody said, well, why is I-85 there? I thought, this is getting frustrating. And so I started to think about, well, why I-85 is clearly where this is coming from. Clearly they map onto each other, but where does I-85 come from? And so I started talking to some anthropologists, and they said, well, it's one of these things where like every time I ask the right person what I'm asking about, the answer is obvious that was inobvious to me. And they said, well, that's the pre-colonial major north-south road in eastern North America. And so that was the footpath. And that probably the reason the footpath was there was that was the easiest place to cross rivers on foot. And so that was an amazing answer with implications I'll get to in just a second. But then I started talking to archaeologists, and archaeologists said, well, sort of. You don't trust anthropologists. And they said, well, if you look at Clovis sites from 11,000 years ago, each one of these data points is individual Clovis spear point. And you get mostly these points along rivers, but the other thing is that the archaeologists had noticed is that there's this north-south line, and I've indicated them in red, where you get points moving north and south along the road. And what the archaeologists have argued is this is where Clovis people moved north and south 11,000 years ago, because that's where the megafauna was moving, and that was the best place to hunt the megafauna when you were moving north and south. And so it is not implausible that the default vision for the city of the future is that it's where megafauna that are now extinct used to walk. And so either the ideal location for and shape of cities happens to perfectly coincide with the ideal location of the paths of extinct megafauna, or we've failed to make active decisions and have constructed a world circumscribed by 12,000 years of business as usual decision making. And in truth, the geography of Charlanta is one that maximizes negative environmental impact and minimizes energy efficiency, among other things. It's clearly not optimized. And so it looks like we're sitting atop a long legacy of doing the same thing again and again. And so I've presented this a number of times and said that we need to make active choices to change this scenario. And students have basically stood up and said, but you've just presented the data that shows that we've not done that. And so how are we as students supposed to think that we can do something different when this is what we've done again and again? And what we are trying to offer today is an optimistic take on the reality that by working together, we can actually envision different scenarios for the future. And that from an NC State perspective, from a universities in the state perspective, from a museum's perspective, from a public perspective, we are at a moment where we're actually as able to make change as we've ever been in many ways. And at the same time, as Chuck reminded me when we were walking in, the prediction is that we're going to have 3.5 million more people in North Carolina in the next 30 years. And so the default is where those people are going to pile on that Charlanta. It'll sneak its way down to Raleigh-Durham, and that's what we'll have. But we have an opportunity collectively to imagine different futures. And so what I ask you to think about as you listen to the talks tonight is not the future you want, but what are the possible scenarios for the future? And how do we start to talk about those scenarios and start to talk about which of those scenarios do we want? Because there's no one person in here who's going to be able to tell you what we should do. It's a community exercise. And so can we start to work together to think about this? And so we have amazing keynote speakers today. Georgina Sanchez, research scholar from the Center for Geospatial Analytics, is going to think about how do we model the different futures that we can have. Clint Pennick is going to talk about all sorts of things about ants and other insects and what they say about our futures. That's sort of over here to how we tend to think about cities, but I think has a lot to say, you'll see, about what we can do. Kofi Boone's going to bring a landscape architecture perspective to this future. Julie White is going to bring a realistic perspective on what it actually looks like to make some of these changes and think about these futures on the ground. Christopher Galick is going to think about how we at NC State are part of thinking about these futures, because NC State as a campus is Christopher, where'd you go? There you are. What number city are we? 24. We're the 24th biggest city in the state, and so on campus, in addition to whatever we do across the state, we are a city. And so we can make bold decisions in real time. And so listen to these talks. Think about what scenarios you want. Think about who you want to talk to about those scenarios. And then I'm going to close here, which is I was outside at the amazing exhibit that Max Colley has orchestrated as part of the Durham Museum of Life and Sciences. And this is a quote from one of the children, or one of the members of a family. I guess I don't know if it's I guess I do know it's a child. And thinking about the future, who says, there are ways we do things today that I don't like. I hope we can make good decisions about the future. And I can think of no more appropriate way to lead into where we're going. I hope we can make amazing decisions about the future, but if we're going to do it, it's going to need to be together, and we're going to need to be able to see multiple futures so we can work toward those ones that we want. And so this is the beginning. We're at the beginning of the path, but it's a path that we can work on together. And without further ado, am I doing the introduction to the next one? Georgina is going to come and talk to us about how we think about modeling some of these dimensions of the future. Thank you, Georgina.
Thank you, Rob. Can everyone hear me well? All right. Well, thank you, Rob. Thanks, everyone, for being here. This is very exciting. Research shows that humans, we struggle with making decisions that impact the future. This happens because we emotionally disconnect from our future selves, which then makes us undervalue those long-term outcomes and consequences. Is it better now? There you go. I can also hold that in. Probably will be easiest. So that takes us to undervalue those long-term outcomes and consequences. What I find fascinating is that we often struggle with understanding the importance of our future selves simply because we lack imagination. Psychologists have found that engaging with future visualizations can profoundly influence present choices. For instance, when presented with an age-progressed version of oneself, there is a strong motivation to take action today, such as start wearing sunscreen more frequently. But why do we act? Well, it happens that we act because that visualization connects us with our future selves. It makes it personal. And while I'm not a psychologist, I do spend most of my time envisioning our collective future. My work focuses on harnessing data that help us understand past trends, and then developing models and visualizations that can help us understand future change, looking into years and decades into the future, to then ask questions like where and when the urban landscape may continue to expand, or how communities may adapt in the face of climate stressors. We can then simulate different what-if scenarios and evaluate alternative, not yet enacted strategies to then compare the outcomes and evaluate trade-offs, fundamentally transforming the way in which we do resilience planning and conservation. Our lab experience has clearly shown that when we make a problem spatial, it becomes personal. In the same way that I show you that age-progressed photo, geovisualization and mapping can help us engage with the where and when of impact and understand who's being affected and how. Now, I'm going to transport us to Charleston, South Carolina. Here we have a bird's eye view from the region. This is a low-lying region experiencing rapid urbanization. Here we have cultural and natural ecosystem services threatened by the coastal squeeze that compound pressure by sea level rise and urban expansion. Charleston is an area that I would argue stands at the forefront of climate adaptation, given its vulnerability to flooding. Current state-of-the-art risk assessment and exposure typically involves overlaying a layer of inundation onto existing development. Then we identify areas that might be at risk. Yet, this approach only provides a partial picture. Neighborhoods are not born equal. Our models should be able to account for disparities and different levels of adaptive capacity when estimating exposure and assessing risk. We need to understand where people struggle and how. We need a comprehensive set of scenarios to understand what the future could look like. We need to understand what communities how they may respond to increased flood risks, who may have the resources to adapt, and what are the challenges faced by those with limited resources for protection. So here's the question: how would our actions change today if we could visualize these future outcomes? Well, let's take a look. Our research lab has recently accomplished really exciting modeling advances that enable us to simulate interactions between urban growth, increased flooding, and human adaptive response. In this business as usual scenario that I'm displaying, we can anticipate the Charleston expanding economy and population continue to fuel demand for new development in coming decades. This leads then to the conversion of natural and working lands into developed areas. This modeling approach is probabilistic, where on the map, darker orange colors represent areas that are more likely to see that conversion from natural to developed. And lighter tones of orange represent locations that are less likely to do so. We are able to visualize where, when, and how new development might impact areas that we care about, making it personal. And as residents and planners become increasingly aware of the growing risks of flooding, they're likely to respond to this threat and adapt when feasible by elevating structures or building protective measures. Now, these areas are represented on the map in darker turquoise. These are the communities we anticipate are more likely to have or find the necessary resources to adapt property or rebuild. But not all residents or communities will have the means or capacity to build protective measures. Without specific policies in place and incentives to then minimize exposure and potential damage, communities may choose or be forced to retreat as their adaptive response to recurrent flooding. Darker purple colors on this map represent exactly that. These are concentrations of vulnerabilities where communities may lack the resources to protect themselves, sustain their social systems, and livelihoods. But I'm not gonna end on a negative note. This doesn't have to be our future, right? I just shared with you how we have the capacity to visualize the outcomes of current development choices. We can identify communities that might be at risk, the ones that lack the resources to protect themselves, and the urgency of the situation. And that is exactly where we start. We then connect creativity and engineering to build spaces that are intentionally designed to make room for water. Take, for example, this inspiring concept of Imagine the Wall, which combines engineered structures and natural features like tidal marshes and oyster reefs to protect the urban areas, making them more resilient, and it maintains that special connection that Charleston has with water. Or so many other inspiring solutions that acknowledge floods as a natural process to be integrated, not resisted. Keeping people and structures safe while providing these clever spaces for recreation and community. And I'm gonna close with this. We don't really need to guess with what our future will be. We have the capacity to visualize that outcome, those future changes. We can evaluate different alternatives. And then we can harness all of the ingenuity that we're gonna be talking about tonight to develop and explore sustainable and equitable solutions. Thank you. Now, do I introduce our next speaker? Clint.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. You guys can hear me. So how I want to start is to ask you all to imagine the oldest city you can think of. Take a minute and think about what that place might be. If we stay in North America, maybe we could think Tenochtitlan. That was from 1300 AD, and when it was founded, it's now Mexico City. If we go to Europe, Rome, that's a good one. We know when it was actually founded, right? 753 BC. So now we're looking at plus 2,000 years of continuous inhabitants. Or maybe you want to go all the way back to Ur. This is what they told me when I was a kid. Everything is as old as Ur. This is one of the oldest cities that's in the Fertile Crescent, still standing, though not inhabited. And this is going back to 8,300 BC. But in the history of the Earth, none of these cities are that old. If we really want to look at ancient civilizations, archaeologists are not going to get All right. Can you guys hear me now? Yeah, okay. Right before my big reveal, my mic cut out, right? Okay. So the punchline, ants. That is the answer. So we go back, not just 8,000 years, but 150 million years. These are when the first ant societies evolved. And so if we want to know what our future is going to be, we can actually look at the simple ant that is living on our sidewalks today to give us a hint at what some of these changes might look like. So I wanted to walk briefly through the evolution of societies and ants and pull out some ways that we can potentially learn from them. And I'm starting with a picture of my favorite ant. This is the species I dedicated my dissertation to. This is what I did in grad school. It's called the Indian jumping ant. And they represent kind of the primitive ant. If you want to use that terminology. They live in small colonies of a few dozen workers. They're hunters. So they leave the nest and they track down large game, like this big cricket here, and then they drag them back to their hole in the ground, and their nest looks like this. So these ants live in the Western Ghats in India. It's a floodplain. And they have this ingenious nest structure that they've developed that actually helps them deal with flooding, or, if we put it in human terms, wastewater management, right? And so they have this entrance hole they go through, but inside, once they get inside, they have this basketball-like structure that they build out of the pupal cocoons that their larvae spin with silk. So they recycle the material in their nests, and they literally wallpaper their nest with a waterproof material. And when it floods, the rain runs through that hole in the top and then runs down to the bottom into this wastewater catchment area in the very bottom, right? So they have this ingenious system that helps them survive in these floodplains. Not only that, but this catchment system is also their trash, and so they have to deal with trash. And so when every time I had to dig one of these colonies up, I knew I got to the bottom because I would see this. This is the trash pile, what you're seeing here is wriggling maggots. You guys all just ate or might be eating, I apologize. But the bottom of their nest, they formed a mutualism with a fly, and the fly rides a worker down to the bottom of the nest, lays their eggs, and then they have vermiculture. Some of us try to do this. I have a compost bin at home, but mine doesn't get rid of all my waste. Their compost bin gets rid of all of it. So I think even the primitive state of ants, they're already building their homes completely out of recycled material. They're dealing with major issues like stormwater management, and they even figured out a way to compost all of their waste. So they're already starting pretty strong. If we jump to what might be considered one of the most advanced ant societies, we see where ants have taken this and where they've grown. So this is a picture of leafcutter ants that live in Central and South America. They build these super highways to cut leaves and bring them back to their nests. And in fact, researchers have found that ants on these highways in some cases are better at dealing with traffic jams than we are. So they already have something on us. They don't eat these leaves. Instead, what they do is they bring them back to their nests and they feed a fungus garden. These ants evolved agriculture 60 million years ago. So we like to think that agriculture is our invention. No, it has been here much longer than we have. And just like our intensive agriculture we have today, where we have monocultures of corn and soy, ants, this is a monoculture. It is one species of fungus that they rear, and somehow they're able to rear this underground. They've been able to do so continuously for millions of years, and they combat weeds and pests and everything else without introducing petrochemicals or whatever else into the environment. And so they have figured this out, but we quite honestly haven't figured this out yet. What their nest looks like underground is a bigger version of what I showed you for the jumping ant. So in the middle ground, they have all of these underground chambers that are filled with fungus. There's a man there at the bottom that can show you the scale, how big these colonies are. One of these colonies could probably take up a third of this room. They are massive colonies. The fungus produces so much CO2 that they have a ventilation system. So they have turrets at the top that have passive ventilation where they cycle CO2 out and bring in fresh air, and they do all of this without electricity. And then again at the bottom of the nest, they have their waste chambers. And so this is where all of the diseased fungus goes and any dead ants and any kind of waste. And then they have a special cast of workers that once they move to work those waste dumps are never allowed to be back in the colony to prevent any kind of disease spread. And this is the point of the talk when I want to say that we can learn a lot from ants, but maybe we shouldn't take morals from ants, right? We should let our waste workers go back home at the end of the day, right? This is a species that I began working on when I was a postdoc at NC State. This ant species lives in trees, Cecropia trees in Central America. And inside these trees, they're hollow, and the ants divide up the space and they build their nest in these different compartments. They have some compartments that are trash compartments. They have some where workers hang out. And then they have some compartments that are nurseries where they keep their developing larvae. And we looked at microbes and disease throughout these nests. And what we found is that the cleanest part of their nest is the nursery. They actually keep the nursery clean. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Their nursery that we take them to is the dirtiest place in my city. I can tell you that. So ants have figured out how to control pathogens in their nurseries, and we are not anywhere close to doing something like that, which I think is amazing. How are they doing it? This is the back of an ant. Those 2 holes are openings to this gland. Ants evolved this gland early in their history that produces antibiotics. Ants have antibiotics, again, millions and millions of years before we do. We've done work here that we found that at least half of the species that live in Raleigh produce antibiotics, which is pretty amazing. And they've been doing this, again, so long, and there are no superbugs for ants that we know of. How are they doing this? We have MRSA and C. diff and all of these things that resist antibiotic treatment. Ants somehow have gotten around this. We don't know how, but we would like to, right? They don't just kill microbes, but they also form mutualisms with them. They work with beneficial microbes. So this is an ant that's standing. It's one of these fungus gardening species. This is one that lives on campus. It's right outside this door. And those white patches on the chest of the ant there, those white patches are a mutual bacteria that produces its own antibiotics that they use to treat diseases in their fungal gardens. So ants are also finding ways to work with microbes. And the last thing I want to talk about is just the architectural systems that these ants create. And so this is a picture of my undergraduate advisor, Walter Chinkel, who is the one who invented the method to cast ant nests by pouring molten metal and then digging them back out. This is a beautiful harvester ant nest from Florida. We worked with students at NC State in the architecture program actually to map these different designs we see in ant nests onto cities. And we find some of the ant nests, like fire ants, Solenopsis invicta, they have these tangled masses of tunnels, and they resemble places like Paris or these old medieval cities where there's high connections. There's linear nests that resemble coastal cities or cities like Quito pressed against mountain ranges. And then these Pogonomyrmex nests, these are the ones that I showed in the previous picture. They have this spoke-like design where they come together at a central hub, but they have spokes that go out to different, you could call them suburbs in the ant world, and this maps onto something like Raleigh. So there are some parallels between ant nests and cities, though we don't understand why the ants even build these. We're doing research on that in my lab right now. And then trying to draw parallels can be hard at looking at something like an ant. They're crushed together and smashed, and they live in these really tangled, very dense situations inside their colony. But we started to compare the density of ants within these colonies to density of humans in different cities. And what you can see is, for the most part, we are not as efficient at using space. So if you look at Melbourne or Raleigh, there's a lot of space for each person in our cities. But if you go all the way to the extreme end, the densest human population known was the Kowloon walled city near Hong Kong. That actually overlaps. People lived at densities that ants live in their nests. And so if we looked at where the future, we're becoming increasingly urban, we're living in denser and denser societies, and I think we're going to be dealing with similar challenges that ants deal with at the density they are. And so what I want to leave you with is this science fiction illustration of what the ant worlds of the future might look like if we continue on this path. I don't think this is where we're going to go. I don't think this is what we should be taking away from, we're going to build ant hills and all live in them together in mutual harmony. But instead, I think that we should take a minute to look at ants and realize they are doing sophisticated things that we would really benefit if we could figure out to do for ourselves. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Beth.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you all hear me? All right. Communities can heal. It's something that you don't often hear. And what it may presuppose is, can communities hurt us? And the answer is yes. And we have an incredible legacy, even in our own backyard, with freeways, urban renewal, redlining, many tools where we've deployed state-of-the-art technology, but at the cost of things that we hold dear: human health, education, economic development, the ability to hold on to your culture. So the spirit of this talk is talking about components of community that can heal the harm that we've done. And as we start to envision the future, to encourage you to think about issues of equity and justice as you think about that vision of the future. We're in hurricane season, and we've spent a lot of time in the College of Design, Chuck was with us, working with communities in eastern North Carolina. This idea of climate change, climate adaptation, how do we deal with larger, more violent storms that are more unpredictable, that can do harm at any time. And so this idea of resilience, a lot of the students in the audience will appreciate that because you just finished midterms. You got to be resilient to get a good grade for your finals. I respect that. I understand that. But resilience as a theme, as we think of the future, where disturbance is going to become more unpredictable. And we're going to have to learn how to bounce back. And communities can be designed to deal with that. I appreciate the previous talk talking about ants. I want to talk about oysters. Their taste a little better than ants. The reason I'm bringing this up is that communities don't always mean human communities. And what we're learning in the future with cities, as was illustrated in the last talk, is that these mutually dependent relationships that we have with our non-human friends, these are things that indigenous and native communities have known for thousands of years, that human beings are a part of an ecosystem, not a part of from it, right? So this is an example that comes to us from Scape, a prominent landscape architecture firm based in New York City, that developed the idea of oyster texture in response to Superstorm Sandy, which inundated parts of New Jersey and New York over a decade ago. The rebuilding of oyster reefs as a way to block and slow storm surges and protect communities. So investing in the health of a non-human community protects and shields and protects from harm human communities. This is the rendering that started that whole proposal. It required rewriting all of the codes for how we deal with coastline development in New York City, because it didn't allow for the kinds of innovations required to reintroduce and protect oysters. They are, 10 years later, they're installing it now. And so what the role of the designer and the researcher was how do you create structures that block storm surge, but also are homes for our non-human friends. And so it's evidence-based, it's scaling up, it's working already, and it's inspiring lower tech versions. So the Nature Conservancy, which actually has a very big footprint and presence, even in our home state, is looking at similar strategies of restoring natural systems and the health of our non-human neighbors to protect our communities on shorelines and coastlines. Really progressive people are finding green job development opportunities in that. So as a part of the broader extension of justice and equity, why should those benefits only come to us as technical experts? Why can't people who live in those communities and had to endure those harms be first in line to get benefits? So this is the Power Corps based in Philadelphia, and the short story with the Power Corps is the city of Philadelphia was sued for combined sewer overflows and raw sewage going into the Schuylkill River by the federal government. They raised money and they said, well, what we're going to build is this big concrete box under the Schuylkill River, a big toilet, and put all the poop in it. And so people said, well, you could do that, but you could also take that exact same amount of money that you built for a giant toilet under the water and redistribute that money to create green spaces in communities that never had it, that dealt with natural solutions and nature-based solutions for dealing with stormwater to hold it in place so it never even made it to the Schuylkill River, because that's how healthy systems operate. When a raindrop falls, it's supposed to land and stay where it goes, right? And with that, we can solve unequal access to open space. We can train a whole new workforce in green infrastructure management and development, which didn't exist. We can certify people in these jobs so that after they learn in their own communities healing the harm that was done with these technologies, they have a business they can take wherever they go, because repair of these systems and developing nature-based solutions is going to be the business of the 21st century in every major city. In our own backyard in Charlotte with Little Sugar Creek, which was inundated and flooded over a decade ago, working collaboratively with governance and property owners to actually replat property lines to protect the areas that are supposed to flood and turning them into amenities around which you could start to reestablish development that's tied to the community. Other errors that we're dealing with and mistakes that we're trying to fix. Maybe we just have too many freeways. Maybe we put them in the wrong places. Maybe there's actually evidence that we strategically put them in places to displace and to harm specific communities. Those aren't maybes, those are all real. So the Reconnecting Communities program, which is putting $1.5 billion into a pilot program across the country to revisit the harm done by freeways, how it divided communities, how moving through these communities exacerbated cardiovascular and respiratory diseases because of emissions, how it prevented people who can't drive, the 66% of people in the United States who aren't able or can't drive, to not be able to move. So this is the Rose Kennedy Greenway. If you go in the central part of Boston, it's a linear park built on where the Central Artery Freeway used to be. It increased adjacent property values, it increased health benefits, it increased livability in the footprint of what used to be a double-decker freeway. Or in Seattle, and in our own region, one of the biggest issues is affordability and displacement. Based on some studies, we have almost 25,000 to 30,000. We don't have, that's the gap. We need 25 to 30,000 affordable units in order to even be equal to the demand of affordability in our region right now. One of the reasons is private property, right? That all the incentives that are dealt with real estate are to incentivize you maximizing profit on private property. But there are other structures that are cooperative, community land trusts, which start to take the real estate and the private real estate functions out of that, the speculative component, and can perpetuate permanent affordability and accommodate development through cooperative investment. So this is Africa Town in Seattle. That's a picture I took in May. It's a community land trust. It's just as urban, just as livable, just as green as the nicest part you can find in our region. But it's a community land trust owned by Black people. And so the mixed use, all the investment is designed to retain and hold on to that community. Or we could go to the other side of the ocean. So the Vauban district in Freiburg, Germany, which is often celebrated as one of the most sustainable communities on earth, right? Where 65% of their energy demand is generated within that community. So you think about where you live and the big Duke power bills you play. I'm sorry, Duke Arena, I can't say that. All right, so the mysterious power company X bills that you receive. right? What if you only had to pay 30% of them? And through solar panels and through proper insulation in buildings, and you can see there are no cars, right? So what if your community was planned so you didn't need a car? So actually going to the store or going to school or going to worship or going to work was physical activity. These places exist. These are places that were done intentionally to deal with these particular issues. And lastly, food. So I spend a lot of time thinking about climate adaptation and how do we deal with our carbon footprint. Between 25 and 30% of our carbon emissions are caused by agriculture. Agriculture, in-ground agriculture. So as we start to invest in alternative forms of growing our food more intensively, not only does it compound on the other issues that we're addressing, creating jobs, creating innovation, meeting the need for people who are food insecure, radically reduces our food input. So this is the firm Sasaki and a lot of their planning as they deal with fast-growing Pacific Rim cities. And to leave you with this, our communities don't have to hurt us, past, present, or future. We can play a role to make sure that they can heal. Thank you.
So I want to take you back to the spring of 2020 when we all went home. Not the first month when, you thought you were going to be there just a little bit, you were enjoying your family, you were wearing, your comfortable clothes, but like a month or two into it. Remember how you felt being home for a while when you realized this wasn't going to be short term? When you realized that those four walls were what you were going to see for quite a while. Maybe your job required you to keep going to work, like we did at the DOT, but our work was different. We were alone. We were 6 feet apart. We were behind doors and walls. We were behind masks. Remember how it felt to long for the company of others. Remember missing our extended families and other loved ones far away. Remember when you started to feel stir crazy at home? Maybe the people who you'd been living with every day were starting to get on your nerves. When you really wanted to go out to a restaurant, you wanted to go shopping. You wanted to go see your family that was far away. Remember when you really started craving being physically present in other spaces with other people. Remember how it felt to crave human connection. Sure, we all learned how to use Zoom and Teams, and we all tried to teach our parents and grandparents how to use Zoom and Teams. It helped, but it wasn't the same thing from behind a screen. COVID taught us the value of human connection in a whole new way, and how we wanted to spend our time in a different way. With COVID, we saw telework explode and commuting patterns change. We at the DOT have seen our trains fill up now at rates we've never seen before. People are on bikes, they're on trails, they're on sidewalks. Our airports are packed. People want to move and connect in different ways than they've ever done before. The question I'm posing to you today is how will we take what we learned from COVID and the need to connect, and how we move around our states and our communities and change the way we're designing and building our communities and our transportation systems for the future we desire. How will we connect in the future? I believe the future of cities and towns is shared, electric, autonomous, multimodal, and easy. Infrastructure is generational. Concrete and steel are 30 to 50 years. The choices we make today about how we plan and build our communities and our transportation systems need to start with the end in mind, because today's planning and investment decisions determine tomorrow's connections. At the DOT, we're not just thinking about how we have changed how we're using our transportation system, but we're also thinking about new mobility technologies and using them to help us prepare for the system of the future. Again, trying to start with the end in mind. We believe that autonomous vehicles will continue to improve, and eventually our cars will drive themselves. But simply removing the driver doesn't change the way we connect, and it doesn't change the way we build cities. They continue to be built in a very car-centric way. So we are learning from our CASI program. I love putting this slide up because it's right out front of this building. Cassie, isn't she cute? Cassie is a little shared autonomous electric vehicle. She's a novel design, and she was first launched right before COVID here on your campus. We have subsequently deployed her at the Wright Brothers Memorial, at Carey Bond Park, and she's currently at UNC Charlotte. If we want to change the way we connect and change the way we build our communities, we have to think about shared mobility as a key component. With each deployment of our CASI shuttle, we seek to advance our understanding of technology and how we need to change what we are building today to be future ready. And we're not stopping there. We're working to put autonomous technology on traditional vehicles and electric vehicles, like in the town of Wilson's microtransit program, because we don't want to leave rural communities behind this exciting future. This shared electric, autonomous, multimodal, easy future that we're working on today will help us think differently about how we connect, about how communities are planned and built, and enable us to connect in ways we cannot today. North Carolina isn't just the first place that flight was done many years ago, but it was the first place we flew a fully autonomous air taxi in January of 2020. This is the EHang. It's an autonomous eVTOL, or electric vertical takeoff landing aircraft. And next week, we'll be partnering with Beta, who has built an electric aircraft. Their ALIA aircraft will be flying from the northeast to the southeast and will stop here at Raleigh Executive Jetport in Sanford, North Carolina, to charge their electric aircraft. We're putting in our very first multimodal charging station, and I say multimodal because in addition to cars, it will charge aircraft. These futuristic air taxis are envisioned to transport groups of people between vertiports, or nodes, in different communities. Major airlines are investors in these because they see a future where you buy a single ticket and it takes you on an air taxi from the vertiport in your community to your airport, onto your commercial flight, back at the other end on an air taxi to your final destination. We're using our experience with the EHang and the Beta to help inform where we make investments today that are future ready. For example, we're working with communities along the S-Line, a future rail line that goes from DC through Virginia, through North Carolina, through the Triangle, and south down to South Carolina, and helping these communities along the line prepare for future mobility hubs. We're helping them envision transit-oriented development that is walkable, with affordable housing, more density, town centers with retail on the ground floor and apartments above, shared green spaces, economic hubs of activity, and our design, you'll see, has vertiports in it. So using what we're learning about the future for the investments we make today. This future that's shared, electric, autonomous, multimodal, and easy. Well, why easy? Because in COVID, what we realized is we could have something off our phone in our door in 2 hours. We could have anything easily from our phone at our door, and we took advantage of it. If we're going to encourage this future to include the robust use of shared electric autonomous mobility, we have to make it easy. So we are building a mobility as a service app that will let you get from Murphy to Manio across all of the modes with one planning app. Our vision for the future of connecting in cities and towns across our city is shared, electric, autonomous, multimodal, and easy. We envision a future where people have options for how they travel and for how they connect, because we know more than ever now that the connection to one another is paramount. The future is being determined today with the plans and investments we make today that lead to this envisioned advanced mobility future. So my challenge to you is to get engaged and involved in the plans your community is making today if you want a future that looks different tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I got one. I think it works. Thank you very much. How's my volume? Oh, it's there. Okay. So that was easy to answer. I have the most boring intro slide, but in my defense, I'm supposed to be teaching right now. So I just have about 3 hours of content to cover, and we're going to start with a quiz. So in what year was the structure you live in built? Just a show of hands here. And if you don't know, that's fine. Just take a guess. Was it before 1949? Okay, a few. 50 to 69? Okay, about the same. 70 to 89? Okay. 90 to 2009? Since 2009. Okay. So I have no idea how that actually added up, looking at hands. Here's what it looks like across the country, in theory. Oh, it's animating each one. That's great. Okay, so this is data from the American Community Survey. So this shows the average age of homes, the distribution of homes across the country. As you can see here, there's kind of a long tail. So those are the same categories that I just asked you right now. The median age of homes in the US right now is 44 years old, so built in 1979. Think about the technology we had in 1979. And that's the median. I'm not using the average because there's a long tail there that goes way back. But the reason I put this up here is because when we talk about the built environment, it's sticky. It sticks around for a while, like the previous speaker said. Once we put something on the ground, it tends to hang around for a while. This is a pretty obvious thing when you're talking about the built environment. Again, 44 years median age here. And the reason that I talk about this is because when we're talking about our energy futures in particular, there's only so many things we can do once the thing is on the ground. And so I'd like to split my talk into two parts, the phone and the Phoenix. Start with the phone. So using the analog example here, and I had such nice transitions. Okay, we'll start with the phone. So at some point, homes were wired for telephones. At some point, those telephones went to rotary. At some point, rotary went to touchtone. At some point, wired touchtone went to wireless, and now we're dominated by cell phones with landlines falling out of favor. We can see the same sort of gradual transition on the energy side. So for those of you with an Apple device, in a recent iOS update, they put this new feature in here that allows for smart charging when there is an opportunity to reduce your greenhouse gas footprint. So how many were aware that this is a feature that's out there? Okay, how many have iPhones? Okay, so all of those who didn't raise the hand the first time, but the second time, this is automatically enabled. So your phone defaulted into this, looking for times where the grid is greener to charge at that point. So these are the sort of things that we can see incrementally coming into our homes. And I'm using homes as an analog for the broader urban environment. We can think of things at a bigger scale. Think about the same technology, the same idea affecting the way that our water heater uses power, our dishwasher, our air conditioner, connecting with the grid to say, now's the time to use it, or perhaps now's the time to stop because we need that power to heat the region because it's really cold, or to cool the region because it's really, really hot. The problem is that that takes new technology, and we're seeing this, again, incrementally. Duke Energy is in the process of rolling out smart meters to allow your house to communicate with the grid better. My local co-op scared the daylights out of me when they walked down my driveway one day this summer and to install mine. So this is happening, but again, it's incremental. We can think about bigger steps. We can be affecting the home's envelope, installing new windows, putting more insulation in the attic to help that home become more efficient. We can go the next step and add solar to the rooftops, or we can even put a fast charger in the garage. And if we do all of these things, research shows, I promise you it'll show it, that we can have an effect. Okay, so this projection comes from the US mid-century strategy for deep decarbonization and it came out in the last few days of the Obama administration. We call it the US mid-century strategy for short. And the idea behind this report is that it provides a roadmap for how we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to meet international targets by the year 2050. And what this graph shows is that between when the report was written in 2016 and 2050, the figure on the right, that we can reduce in the buildings sector our total consumption of power, the size of that bar, but also the amount that we rely on from fossil sources. That's the brown portion of this. But the thing that I want to mention at this point is that this only goes so far. Right? We're talking about incremental shifts to a sticky stock, something that's going to be around for a long period of time. We can be, of course, retrofitting, but even with policies on the books that encourage this, all of those decisions are made by millions of individual homeowners and operators. And so the decision to put solar across a community depends on my decision, my neighbor's decision, the people down the street individually, perhaps in response to policy, but those are incremental decisions. Furthermore, Like I said before, it's a very sticky stock. Okay, which brings me to my second point, and that's the Phoenix. This is the community of Lahaina, Hawaii, on the island of Maui, home to the horrific wildfires in August. This is the city of Paradise, California, destroyed by the Camp Fire in 2018. This was the city of Greensburg, Kansas, which was destroyed by an EF5 tornado in 2007. The tornado that took out this town was estimated at 1.7 miles wide. Now, for context, that's like starting from the bell tower, walking all the way down Hillsborough, and stopping at the 440 interchange near Meredith. It was that wide. The reason I bring up this community in particular is that after it was destroyed, Greensburg made the intentional decision to come back green. So everything they did was green. They built their community green. They put in energy efficient buildings. They put in renewable energy generation through wind. Now there's some cautionary tales here in terms of what they were trying to do to attract external investment, new jobs, things like that. But the commitment they made to holistically envision their community green is something that I think we can really learn from. Because if we're talking about this existing stock and building new stock little by little by little, that only gets us so far. And unfortunately, the situations like we've seen in Lahaina, like we've seen in Paradise, like we've seen in Greensburg, are going to become all too frequent in the near future. Some estimates by the Union of Concerned Scientists say that by the year 2100, there will be nearly 500 communities that are severely affected by flooding, simply due to sea level rise. Separate estimates say that over 13 million people would be displaced by sea level rise in that same year. If you take the average household size of 2.6 people per house, that's over 5 million new structures needed just to respond to sea level rise in the next 70 years alone. That's roughly 4% of the US housing stock that we're going to need to replace because the ones that are there are going to be underwater. If we add to that fire, if we add to that significant inland flooding, which is likely to get more intense and frequent, there's going to be ample opportunities, unfortunately, to rebuild and, to borrow a phrase, build back better. The problem, however, is that traditionally these two sides, oh, look at that, it's my note slide, that's great. Okay, let's just, okay, so I don't know what presentation this is, but it's a different one than I was hoping for. So we will call an audible on that one. I'm glad this is recorded and being broadcast. Step away. The problem is one of governance, however. So oftentimes this idea of green, this idea of resilience, they're handled separately. We've done some research into community relocation, places where communities are already facing the decision to move. There's one in Alaska that we're looking into, one in Louisiana, one right here in North Carolina. And we're looking at what are the policies that are influencing the decisions that they make when they have to move. Who are the entities that are involved? And what we found is across all three communities, we only found one policy that overlaps all three, and it's the National Flood Insurance Program. We likewise only found 3 entities, federal, state, or local, that overlap across all three. And what this speaks to is a lack of coordination between the two. And so while there's tremendous opportunity to combine that green side, the fun stuff that we talk about on the technology, the community solar, the distributed power that we can rely upon, these fast chargers, better connected systems, microgrids, all these fun sorts of things that we talk about on the energy side, those conversations have often been separate from the, we just need to rebuild. And so I think there's some hope here. In the final slide I was going to leave you with, imagine it here, was a recent climate resilience framework that was announced just 2 weeks by the Biden administration to start bringing these sides of the conversation together. Because again, I think that there's opportunities to be incremental through the phone, right? To be incrementally chipping away at the way we deal with energy in a historical sense. But these opportunities to literally rebuild from the ashes represent some true transformative opportunities to really remake how we use energy in the future. So that's what I have, and I would say thank you on the slide, but again, it's a deep dark. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Excellent. Can we give these guys a hand? Great presentations. My name is Chuck Flink, and I'm the director of the Initiative for Community Growth and Development. Where's my dean? Where's Dean Hoverston? He's here. Adam Walters is here. Luma is our research assistant. So we're brand new here on the campus. We're really just kind of getting underway, but we're essentially a reflection of the DNA of this university. Our land grant mission is what we're all about. We're looking at the disparity in growth and development that has been occurring across our state. If you're in the Piedmont Crescent, get out your popcorn. It's a lot of fun, lots of growth happening. If you're in some of our rural communities, they're going that fast in the opposite direction. They're shrinking, they're losing populations, they're struggling economically. So who better to take on this mantle of trying to understand growth and development from this really broad perspective but the People's University, NC State University, and really respond to our DNA of being that land-grant mission-based university. Really want to thank our speakers tonight. This was fantastic. I want to also thank Rob Dunn and his team at the Provost Office. As Rob mentioned, we're going to grow by 3.5 million people. A lot of that, about 2 million of those people, are going to be located between Raleigh and Charlotte. It's really unprecedented amount of growth that's going to happen in the next 30 years. And just a few takeaways from our lectures tonight. By 2050, by the way, 2/3 of humans will live in cities around the globe, 2/3. And the same will be true here in America, and the same will be true here in North Carolina. So 2/3 of all people by 2050 will live in cities. So Georgina invites us to use technology to envision the future, and while population growth is inevitable, how we grow is a choice. That's in our control, Georgina's message. Clint reminds us that humans are in fact a part of Earth's ecosystems. Not only are we integral with nature, our development patterns mimic those of other life forms. So let's begin to have a much, much better appreciation of Earth's ecosystems. There's too much talk about us getting off this planet and going someplace. We have traveled less than 2 light seconds from this planet in all the time that we've been exploring space. Less than 2 light seconds. For those of you who like to measure space travel in light years, put that in perspective. Kofi shared that it's critical that we grow in harmony with nature and that we are intentional in our efforts to be inclusive, equitable, and compassionate as we grow. And he advocates for nature-based solutions. Julie reminded us how important human connections are and that transportation is for people. And she envisions a future North Carolina network that is shared, electric, autonomous, multimodal, and easy. And that we're in charge of determining the future of that transportation system. And Clint reminds us that we do have these really critically important choices in how we grow. They exist at a micro level and a macro level. And we're required to balance all of that, whether it's based on energy independence or being resilient and adaptive to a warming planet. So tonight we've imagined just a few scenarios for you. That was our goal. We wanted to make this an introductory talk and discussion. And we're looking to the future and figuring out how do we get more active in being a part of controlling that future. I was fortunate to speak to the North Carolina American Planning Association chapter last week, and I made the following observation. You guys are not the victims of some coming apocalypse. You're the people that determine the future. So let's get about determining the kind of future communities that you all want to live in. We can do that. We've done it before, and we'll do it again. So before we adjourn and go out and mingle in the lobby, I wanted to see if anyone, we're going to take a couple of questions. So if you have questions, I think we have a couple of wireless mics. Anybody want to ask a question of the panel? We have one question up here. So Jory, can you? Okay. We have one question. Another question? Okay, we have another question over here. So we'll just do these two. Was it you? Maybe one more.
Oh, no.
She's first right here. Raise your hand. First right here. Second, and then we'll do one more. 3. We'll do 3. Okay, 3 questions.
Hello, everyone. So let's imagine we are designing a future industrial park, and that will take place in 2050 or 2060, around that time. And there is one of the industries in them that is making aeroplane equipments. So how should we envision the transportation system there that will carry big equipments for that aeroplane systems. So that will be carbon neutral. So I am not talking about the big tracks that is electric, because that will still need a wider asphalt road. So, so that will contribute to the climate change directly or indirectly. So what would be your suggestion for the transportation system as we see future?
Okay, Julie.
Thank you.
Did you understand?
I'm not sure I got it all.
Okay, so she wants to know what the future transportation system would be.
For very giant, like if this is an industrial park, so you are designing transportation system for an industrial park.
Yeah.
And
What's the future transportation system going to be to service that?
there is a big equipment like aeroplane equipment that will be coming with this.
So an industrial park, you mean like a manufacturing center?
Yes.
And how you would move workforce to and from it?
Like how would the transportation system will be like big equipments usually carried with the track, like big truck. So what will be the alternative of that truck? Because still if you want a big truck to come into a city, that will require a wider road. That will require more asphalt, right?
Right. So one of the things that we have in our mobility hub in the graphic that we had is because you don't want to be bringing large shipping vehicles into urban centers anymore, there were some lockers in there. If you get a chance to go back and look at the slide, we're actually seeing drone package delivery really taking off. So we see larger scale drones bringing packages in, and there's actually a place in the mobility hub where you would drop a box, you know, like a large shipping box, and then there are lockers, much like I think you guys do your system here on campus, right? And so then it goes into, all the packages go into lockers. There's also electric bikes that have cargo carry availability on them to then bike the cargo in a downtown center for the last mile. So I think there's a lot of emerging technologies. You're exactly right. Like we can't just keep widening our roads in an urban center. So I think there are emerging technologies that people are already contemplating to do like a last mile solution that's more carbon friendly.
Yeah,
Thank you. Okay, right over there, Jory. Right there.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Darby Orcutt. I keep hearing on the one hand that we can choose our future. And then I hear that increasing urbanization is inevitable. That seems like a disconnect to me, and I wonder what you think about that. Can we use some of the coming technologies, planning, et cetera, to bring the benefits of urbanization to rural communities, and is that a choice, whether or not to urbanize further?
Kofi, you want to tackle that one? You want me to tackle it, Kofi?
I'll make something up. I think that when we're working with communities, the reasons why people are staying and the reason why, in some cases, people are moving there are really unique aspects of place. And I think that, particularly with mobile technology, that was something that was revealed through lockdown with COVID, is that there are benefits to being together physically in places, but you can still be connected to a network and a system and be productive and have a life almost from anywhere. It's been at the detriment of some city centers. My best friend growing up is from Chicago. He gives me like weekly bulletins about vacancies and office buildings downtown in their central business district, and efforts to convert some office buildings into housing, which actually I think is a good idea to deal with affordability. But I guess the point I'm making is that regarding areas competing with existing urban areas, there are ways to do it in ways that don't compound on the climate, carbon, environmental challenges that we're facing. And I think that that might relate to a different kind of thinking about mobility and network that deals with information technology and sharing. And a lot of rural areas, you know, there are a lot of discussions about access to broadband, access to other forms of infrastructure that allow them to be plugged in. I think that's played out in other parts of the world successfully, and I think we could learn some lessons from other parts of the world with that. So.
Thank you, Kofi. Okay, one final question. It was right over here, right here. And we'll,
Is it you, Joanna? Okay.
Hi, thanks so much for envisioning these beautiful futures. And now I'm going to be not a Debbie Downer, but I want to know how realistic are these? So 3 parts. When do you see these rolling out? If in 50 years we're going to have, what was it, 3-4 million people here?
3.5 in
3.5.
30 years.
Good average. And then how do we get the people making individual choices on board for some of these things that might be bizarre and maybe we want them to happen soon? And then how do you get the government on board? And then finally, what can anybody in this room do today when we leave to get started on this action that, you know, you've convinced us all that should get started ASAP?
Well, you just described the program of the Initiative for Community Growth and Development. Those are the challenges that we're trying to take on. And it is a lot about conversations and connections, and this forum is one. So there's 3 basic platforms that the initiative is working from. One is academics, the other is engagement, and the third is research, to directly answer your question. So on the academic front, we're actually beginning here at NC State to teach real estate development. We want to teach it in a different way than is currently being offered in North Carolina, which is not to take away from those programs because they're terrific. But we want to approach it from the idea of sustainability and design and resiliency as being sort of what leads us into that discussion. And it will be interdisciplinary. And so we've been launching, and I know there's some students who've taken the class here tonight, which is great. It's great to see them. So we're trying to teach that in an interdisciplinary way. And so the students get a chance out of architecture, engineering, environment, business to interact with each other and begin to have those conversations. So that's just one. We're also doing engagement, which this counts as, but we're doing engagement at different levels. We're looking at trying to engage different people across the North Carolina spectrum to figure out the question that was asked over here: how is community growth and development being handled? Where is it being handled well, in ideal ways, and where is it not? And we're also engaging with public officials who are often at the front line trying to make these decisions. They're adjudicating these things as transactions, one-off transactions. And then the third thing we're doing is we're engaging in sponsored research. And we're finding a lot of folks are very interested in sustainable development from different perspectives, whether they be industry, whether they be community leaders, whether they be neighborhoods. You know, there's a real big appetite out for that. So we're trying to do some of the really groundbreaking research that directs North Carolina in the right way. So you've really sort of hit on, you know, why NC State is taking this on and what we hope to achieve. Now, what each of you can do. You're all part of that conversation and that discussion. And I would say, if you're not a student and not engaged in the educational platform here, there's ways of you staying connected with our efforts, both at Rob's level and in what we're doing here with the initiative, because we want to continue to dig and get into the gnarly topics that were brought up tonight. So we appreciate that question. Rob, do you want to add?
Yeah, I was just saying, how many people here are under 30? And if you're not quite under 30, lie, it's fine. Right, that's amazing. And so I would say the other part of this answer is, for you, I mean, there are a lot of stakeholders here who are making decisions in this room. And for you who are going to inherit these futures we're building, to push us, to be bold, to confront us with the futures that you want. I mean, you have an opportunity today after this to eat some ants on a stick that are delicious, but also to find the people on the stage and talk to them, to find other people in the room who are making decisions, and to confront us with these questions of what future do you want? What future do you want to build? What do you need in terms of power to work toward the future that you want to create? We actually have a lot of scope to build things that we've not done before institutionally, in our community, in our state. But we depend upon you under 30 and almost under 30 people to help us understand where should we be going. And so I think that's the other answer to this question, is that as a community, we really need you. And we are eager to provide those platforms for you to be involved in these conversations. We don't always know how to do it. But here tonight is one of those. And so bring your questions up. Find ways to talk to people. Corner me, corner Chuck, corner anybody on the stage to talk about what future you want to see, but also how we can better hear you and what you want to build. And so if we're doing a good job today, we're listening, and we're also building towards lots of other meetings in which we're trying to work toward these decisions. And so I'm delighted with that show of hands for under 30. It is not common. It is wonderful that you're here, and it's wonderful that you want to be part of this conversation. And so to me, that makes me very optimistic. And so I think we're at a wrap, Chuck.
Yep,
so
we
I'll
are.
just say,
We're going to wrap, and we're going to let you guys release. Now here, I'm going to give you the instructions, okay? So listen carefully. Out in the lobby, there's 3 different stations, okay? The center station is where you'll find our speakers. On each side, you'll find some student work that we'd like for you to spend some time looking at. They really have tried to imagine the future as well. We also have our Eco PRT vehicle, which is sitting just outside. There's a group of folks that are associated with that and a little poster. So as you disseminate, out in the lobby, please stick around, come and work with our speakers, ask them questions, delve a little bit more deeply into some of the questions that you have, and also visit our posters. And then, as Rob said, please grab some ants on a stick, for a little extra protein. And thank you guys so much for being a part of this inaugural forum tonight. We appreciate it. Go Pack.